Preparing for the nuclear war, the Diefenbunker, Canadian Forces Station, CARP. So welcome to CARP, Ontario, a part of Ottawa now, but just on the outskirts of the capital city of Canada. And if you take a closer look at where we are looking at here to put such a nuclear fallout bunker, as we zoom in a little farther, this is the Diefenbunker area, the old mess hall that used to accompany it. And as you come down, here is the entrance. And this is where we are going to begin our story here at the Diefenbunker, which is underground and kind of blends right in. So if you're off the main highway, you'll find out that this is a museum. And we begin by going to the old guardhouse, which now serves as the entrance that you can pay to go in to see the Diefenbunker. And here's my family, my daughter and my two granddaughters, getting ready to go in. And one of the relics outside is an old air raid siren just at the beginning, or at the entrance to the bunker. So first of all, before we get started of anything, let's take a look at the construction. And what's impressive about this is this construction took roughly 3 years to do. And it was on time and on budget. And if you'll note the amount of concrete and steel, this was made to take a major blast, including having springs to take some of the shock if a nuclear warhead went off. And on the inside, you'll find a modern 4-level display. So once you move inside, you're going to be greeted by a number of artifacts and displays to show why the bunker was built in the first place and the situation the world was in during the Cold War, starting in the 1950s and ending around 1990-91. So it was life underground. It starts by entering the blast tunnel that was built into the side of the bunker. And this is a good location to see what the blast tunnel actually would look like without the entranceway, with the concrete on either side. And you'll note the long tunnel that goes from there down in toward the bunker. And you're met by George Diefenbacker, who this has been named after at the first interjunction. And once you're in there, there was only a couple ways out. One was through an emergency shaft that was designed in case the people inside had to get out in a hurry. And pea gravel, which is used in a lot of parks, was used to stop radiation from entering. So now we're going to enter the building itself, and you'll note the blast door here, the thickness of that door, and you get a welcome to show you the 4 levels that you're going to be taking a look at. And with all nuclear items and radiation, you had to have a decontamination area, which was basically a number of showers that you could use. And there are hallways, and plenty of hallways, narrow hallways that go throughout the building. So let's take a look at health services, which was a very important item, especially if you're going to be underground. You had to be all self-contained. Therefore, you had to have the most modern equipment to deal with the situations that you could end up with, regardless of what it was. And as you go through, you'll see an old medic book here. This is what I found interesting for the Royal Canadian Army Medical Corps as to a book to follow. There were surgical units, dentistry, pretty well everything that you would need if you were sealed up inside. And keep in mind, this was all modern material at the time. Oh yes, and a dentist chair, and if you've ever had the opportunity to have your teeth drilled by this kind of a dental equipment, you can still feel it. Throughout the entire building, there are a number of areas that are blocked off. That would have been blocked off as well during the time that they were underground. Now, the Diefenbunker was a communications hub for the military and the government, and they had to keep in line with everything. And as their emblem says, communicate and protect And that is what the job of this bunker was, to keep communication lines open as long as possible during a nuclear war. And if you were in such a situation, there were 5 stages that you went through until you were looking at interception through the lines of communication. Now, looking at the control center itself, it was manned using teletype as one of the processes. In order to make sure everything was working, there was a fix-it room, if you'd like to call it that, that would handle all the equipment at that time. Debriefing areas. And one of the ideas to keep in mind, the exhibits were held in sleeping quarters, and you can see the 2 lights here. Bunks would have been held there, and as you can see by this yellow arrow, that's where the reading light would have been for bunks. And you're looking at a wall separating a couple of sleeping areas right here. Some more artifacts of the times then, and you can see the food. But take a look at the games that are here. KGB, Supremacy, Submarine, Torpedo Toy, all games around the times, including a model of the Bomark missile, which is on the right-hand side there at the top. There's also gives you an idea of how the Inuit were moved through the north to help populate certain areas to sort of give more of a safety to the northern areas. And as we go through, there are quite a few artifacts and displays giving you an idea of what it was like during the Cold War period and what the world was facing and why this Diefenbunker or underground safety bunker was built in the first place. Now, as I said, we're talking about communications, and one of the ways in which communication was done was by radio. And the kind of radio that we were looking at here is what's called a ham radio or amateur radio station. And this amateur radio station would have been one of the ways in which communication was done throughout the world. And we have very modern equipment at that particular time, far outdated now. But what is interesting about the amateur radio station, it still is on the go with much more modern equipment, and it is manned by volunteers who lovingly continue the tradition. One of the items you would find here would have been a kitchen to make it seem like it was more of a homey situation. But there's one thing you got to take a look at here, and out the so-called fake window, that's not exactly what anybody wants to see out their window. Communication with the outside, if you were inside, would have been by one phone. You would have been allowed every once in a while to go there. And throughout the entire building, you can see different departments of the Canadian government, emergency measures, industry and trade, and so on, and what their functions would have been, and especially with the civil alert system that they had at the particular time, and who would have been able to go there and what their job would have been done. So we would have had a place like this, which would have been a situation room, where commanders would talk about what is upcoming. And yes, Canada did have a war cabinet at one time, and this is where they would have met, looking at what procedures, what measures are going to have to be done, and what messages are going to have to be sent out. In order to send those messages out, it would have went to the Secretariat, which was right next door to them, and they would become basically your voice. And what you gave them, they would have to get out to the public. And what you see here is a scenario. There was no mass evacuation of the eastern townships. So as we go through, you'll see there are a number of agencies that were all set up to work together as to how the government would work, how they would defend the country, how they would keep in contact with as many parts of the country as they possibly could, including what measures they would have to take for evacuation and so on. So everything that is here is relative to what the emergency would be, and especially from a nuclear strike that would come over the pole. And that was a major way we thought would happen. Every steel door that is built here was made in Canada, and there are a lot of steel doors. So as we go through energy, mines, and resources, note the real modern computers that are on display. Many of them are artifacts that have been gathered and brought in. They are not actually the originals. A lot of the typewriters that you would see would be more of the original for the time period. Even Central Mortgage and Housing would be in here as to what we're going to do. Telegram or Toronto Telegram from 1971. Even though you were deep underground, security was paramount, especially information security. And certain areas such as the computer banks, the systems of data transfer would be off limits to most people. And this is a good example of the technology at the time, which, by the way, was rather modern. CBC radio was found here, a way to continue messages to the public. And you can see in the corner a radio that let them know on the outside that they truly were being broadcast. They did have a complete studio in which they could bring people in and note the red light on the top to tell them that they were on the air. So, the Prime Minister, George Diefenbacker, who this was named after, his quarters would be rather Spartan by any means, including a single bed. Because if something occurred, chances of him bringing his wife were not going to happen. Secretary outside, he ended up with a small lavatory for a shower and to wash off. Then you go into the next would be Minister of External Affairs, which is now called Global Affairs. Again, Spartan offices, very simple, each with basically a secretary to take information, to transfer it from them, but also to receive it from others. So all your important ministries were kept very close together. Now, everybody has to be fed, and that's one of the things they did very well here. They had enough food to carry them through for at least 3 months. And in some cases, those that were on duty here, as you can see in this picture, having a Christmas meal. Oh, yes, and note the Canadian stubby beer bottle that was there. So this would be a gathering area for a lot of the personnel, including a conference room if it was needed. But to give you a little bit of Canadiana, the Canex was here, where those that were underground could buy items such as pop, cigarettes, cigars, chocolate, and any number of items that you would find at a Canex today, and especially personal hygiene items. And of course, personal hygiene included having washrooms that were available to everybody. So let's take a dive even deeper, and we're going to head down to the 400 level, or actually it's the 100 level, the farthest deepest, where all the machinery for water, for air pumping, for heat could be found, the recirculation of all the air throughout the building. And if we continue down to one end, you note the big door, and there it is a vault door. And the idea of this vault door was, if times were getting to the point where we needed to protect our monetary items, gold, important items that were being held in Ottawa and area would be brought here and kept in the vault as a way of economic security. Note the thickness of the door here, the one-way in and one-way out door. So now that we've seen the inside, let's take a look at the outside. And it is built in the side of a bit of a knoll, and it fits right in. You'll notice some air circulating areas on top, and here's some more of it. And by the way, that is not a washroom. Off to the far end, you can see the geodesic dome that was used for the radar. Emergency hatches, which we had talked about before, where people could get out, and there they are. They have a plexiglass on the top, in which it would be blown out, and the pea gravel would drop to the bottom. Communications, as we go through, we can see an air duct. And now let's take a look at some of the other items. You can find this on the knoll on the top. It'll give you an idea of what is hidden in plain sight, that if you're looking at it, the fuel tanks, baseball diamond, the mess hall, geodesic radar dome on the far end. This arrow indicates where the garage bunker is, and inside that would have been a big bulldozer to clear out the area in case it had got filled in. Now you have a sewage lagoon, you have the helipad that would have been there to bring, at that time, the government officials as quickly as you possibly could. So after the Cold War ended, and it seemed like nuclear war was not going to happen anymore, what you ended up with is these buildings being decommissioned. But at the same time, as those who fail to learn from history, they are condemned to repeat it, and we must be very careful. There were other areas that had a Diefenbunker, such as in Debert, Nova Scotia, and this will give you an idea. It's built basically the same. You'll see the entryway here, the blast doors on either side. This would have been for the provincial government in Nova Scotia. So if you ever happen to be in Carp, Ontario, outside of Ottawa, please take a visit of the Diefenbunker to see what the Cold War scare was all about. Thank you very much for watching, and please consider watching our other titles as well. Thank you.